So we record this webinar along with all of our others, and we do post that out on our website. So under the resources heading, we have a webinars page, and at the bottom there, we have our archives. So all of the sessions here we've done this month are kind of grouped together, and the ones we ran last year as well. So kind of building up a library of those. We'll also send you the link. So anybody who has registered will get a link through an email. Something we're trying new to this year is the LMS, so our training portal. If you indicated as such in your registration, then we'll actually have linked you up in that system. And so you can just log in to that portal, and you will you'll now see, in this case, a webinar today for the multi-factor experiment. You'll have that little item as a course, and really all it has is the recording, and the you can just mark it as complete. And when you do that, you'll actually be generated a certificate kind of automatically. So you can kind of keep tabs on what things you've been doing. So that's kind of the nice feature there, hopefully, to be able to kind of automate some of that, keeping track of what you've participated in. So, all right, well, with that, we will dive in today. And as I said, we're doing the multi-factor experiment. So let's go ahead here, and I'll just dive in to ARM, and showing really the way to set one of these up is in the regular workflow of creating a protocol. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do a file and new protocol. And we will choose our typical study definition here, the GAL. That is really all the same that you typically would do when you create a protocol. But the key here is when you're on this new protocol dialog. This is really the one trick to setting up a multi-factor design, is that we have not actually created this protocol yet. You'll see the navigation bar doesn't have the treatments or the header or anything like that. So we actually haven't set up the protocol yet. And so this is the opportunity now for us to get into the protocol settings and mark down that we are in a multi-factor design. So that's kind of the one trick, if you will, to it, is to get into this protocol settings right here. And so then on the design tab of the settings is where we can denote and mark down that we are doing a factorial design. So here in the list of designs, the RCB, that's the most common. That's what most people use. But you'll see we have support for quite a few different designs in ARM. There's Latin square, a variety of different lattice designs, augmented designs. We have a couple of those, but the ones we're interested in today are the last three in this list: the factorial, the split plot, and the strip block or crisscross. So all three of these are, in general, multi-factor experiments. And really that is when you have maybe more than one factor that you're either interested in how they interact with each other, or just multiple ways you're building up your treatment list. So the example we'll work on today, filling in, is, let's say we have like 4 herbicide products that we are interested in, and we want to know how they interact and how they perform on different tillage types. So that'll be my examples. I've got 3 different tillage types, and we want each of those 4 herbicide products to be applied on the different tillage types. And then that way we can kind of compare and see if there's a certain tillage type that they perform better on, and then vice versa, kind of how the products stack up against each other across all of the different tillage types. Being able to see if there's any interaction of that sort. So that's really kind of where the focus of multi-factor design is. If you're building that list and you're thinking, I have all of these different combinations, I'm going to test each combination of these two groups, that really is a multi-factor design. And that's where we can use a factorial design for that. And then in our analysis now we'll have you know, a little bit more information, if you will. We can gain a little bit of power because we are specifically, you know, testing all of these different combinations. And so then we can split out the variance we get in our data because we can look at those different combinations. So, and we'll dive into that towards the end of the session too, specifically what we get in the analysis. But that's kind of the theory and why you might want to do a multi-factor design. So here we can choose, I'll just choose factorial to start with. That is the most general multi-factor design. And when we make that selection now, we can fill in the different factors. So this would be the grouping, the pieces of the puzzle, if you will, that we're most interested in. So in our case, I said tillage type and herbicides were the two groups. I've got four herbicide products. I've got 3 different tillage types, and I want all of the combinations of each of those together. And so that really is your different factors. So that is really what we would fill in here is you can kind of give that category a name. So when we refer to that factor in general, we can call it factor A, just being the first factor, but then, you know, filling in this text box gives you the name ARM can refer to it as. So it might mean a little bit more calling it the tillage type as opposed to just factor A. And then you define the number of levels. That'll be how many different tillage types, in this case, we have and are involving in this study. So I would set that to C. So then the second one would be herbicide. I am going to display this list. We do have a list behind here, so you don't have to just hand type. And this list has a couple of different sections. This first part here would just be maybe common types of factorial descriptions. And actually here I had the tillage type, so I should probably pick that one from here. Underneath that initial list is actually a list that might be familiar because it's the treatment type list actually in the main treatments editor. So the nice thing here, if I were to choose herbicide here, then in the treatment editor, it will default any of my factor B levels. It will be defaulted to herbicide. So just a small little shortcut that you can gain there by picking the treatment type. ARM can kind of automatically fill that in. And I think I typed this right, but just to make sure, yep, it did recognize it picked from that list. So I'll be sure to choose from the list so I have that standard terminology. And again, now I have to change my levels to 4 here because it's an herbicide. So that is a factorial design or a multi-factor design kind of in general. I do want to kind of show the difference though between the factorial and then the split plot and the strip plot. Really, you know, everything that we talked about with the factorial is the same for the split plot and the crisscross. Both of those are multi-factor designs. In fact, if you notice, if I change this, nothing else on the screen changes. Really, the difference with a split plot and also the crisscross is when you go to randomize the study. And so, you know, for agriculture experiments, sometimes you don't quite have the ability to fully and freely randomize your plots. If I pick split plot, I kind of chose this example with tillage specifically to highlight a very common reason for using the split plot. With maybe your tillage equipment, it's not so easy to till only a single plot and then you know, hop over to the next row and then, you know, till the next plot because you've completely randomly assigned your plot. Instead, you're going to be kind of limited, and I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to have to, you know, my tillage type is going to span 4 plots, and that's how large our equipment is. We can't get any smaller. It's not practical. So I'm going to have to group all of my tillages together because it's going to go, perpendicular across the field there. My tillage type is going to just have to be that way. I'm going to have one lane, 4 plots wide, that is tillage type 1, and then the next one we can switch the different equipment and do the other tillage type right next to it, and so on and so forth. So that's really where the split plot comes in. Is somehow I'm limited. I can't totally freely run the factorial where you can just totally randomly assign everything within each replicate. It doesn't matter where things are. Instead, I'm limited in one of my factors. They have to be together. And in this case, that's why I marked down the tillage type first as factor A. So when you're choosing the split plot, whatever factor is the limited one in that randomization, the one that's kind of forced to be together, that should be your main factor, which is factor A. The same situation applies with the crisscross. As you can imagine, basically this is a split plot with another level of limitation. So now not only is our factor A limited, but if you have that second factor also has to be grouped, kind of running the other way. Those all have to be together. Probably not the case with an herbicide. You can definitely have those be randomized, whatever. You might just have the backpack sprayer or whatever that you can choose exactly where you put those. But there are some cases where you are limited in 2 factors. And maybe it's a 3-factor study, so you still have some randomization involved. But that would be where the crisscross or the script block comes into play. Now you have two ways that you're kind of limited in how those factors can be randomized. So for our example today, I'll choose split plot. And we'll kind of see later on when we get to that trial map exactly how that impacts the randomization. So this is really the key here as far as setting up the split plot protocol, is to come in here before you're totally in the protocol, come into the protocol settings and get the design set. And we can actually always come back and change this if we needed to tweak our description of the factor or add another level. We'll be able to come back to settings. But the key is to get into, get into the design, set it to be the multi-factor before we get to the treatment editor. And we'll see why here in just a moment. Well, that again is on the new protocol dialog where we haven't actually made it into that new protocol yet. And we're just about ready to go in, making sure to get into the protocol settings to set the design. And the reason then, I click OK, we will go to the treatments editor and we'll see why we want to do that right off the bat. So now we're in the protocol. I haven't saved it yet, so it doesn't have a name. But if we go to the treatments editor, now you'll see really the difference here. We have the treatments editor set up for a multi-factor design. So instead of just having a straight list of all of the treatments involved, we actually are going to define the factor level. So we have factor A levels, the factor B levels, and any comparison treatments that we might have. So here we're describing the levels. So in our case, describe the 3 tillage types. And I'm going to be really boring and just pick tillage type 1, type 2, and type 3. Obviously, you would be able to fill in any and all of the details here for the treatment. For the tillage type, there probably isn't a lot of product or anything else you might necessarily fill in here, but certainly for the herbicides, you certainly could. But just for brevity today, I'm just going to make this very simple and just call them H1 through H4. But again, you can fill in all of the details. Maybe I'll put in some rate information just so we can kind of demonstrate that. Let's just say kilogram or liters per acre or something like that. And they can all be applied at the same rate. Why not? Certainly wouldn't have to be if they're different products. They can do whatever they needed to, but fill in whatever details then, just like you would in a standard RCB design. Any of the studies you've done before, it's really the same thing in the treatments editor. Just now we have different sections of this editor for the different levels. And so we'll have these 3 tillage types and our 4 herbicides. When we get to the trial, we'll actually see then that we get a grand total of 12 treatments. We'll have 12 plots in each replicate because we'll have herbicide 1 on tillage type 1, herbicide 2 on tillage 1, 3 with tillage type 1, 4 with tillage type 1, and then it'll start again, herbicide 1 with type 2, herbicide 2 with type 2. So you get that multiplication really of that 3 times 4 to get the 12. And so that's something, if you're thinking about a study that you've maybe set up as an RCB, but that was kind of how you got to your list, was kind of multiplying 2 things out, that might be a sign that maybe you could make that into a factorial design. And so if that's the case, there's a couple of steps. It's fairly straightforward that you can actually take an existing RCB and change it into a factorial. If you end up with that case, feel free to shoot us an email. We can kind of talk through, just look at the treatment list and see, yeah, this looks like this might be a factorial design, or no, here's a reason why it's not. We can kind of help walk you through how to convert that over if it actually maybe is a factorial design. There's just a couple of steps, and you can kind of switch it over even if you do already have either a protocol or the trial. Either one, we can work through that. So. I will bring along a comparison treatment. So this list for comparison treatments, these would be any treatment that does not fit in this main factorial design. So through the various trainings I've done on this, I haven't had anyone offer a really good, compelling, oh yeah, we always have a comparison treatment in this situation. So I think they're pretty rare, but I do want to bring it along just in case, just to kind of demonstrate what would happen when you do include a comparison treatment, in case there is that situation. So I'm just going to call it Comp T. It's some other treatment. Again, it's not going to be part of this 12. It's not going to be put on these different tillage types or marked as an herbicide. It's going to be separate. It's going to be its own treatment. It's not part of the factorial design. It's not part of the split plot randomization. We'll see on the trial map, it just hangs out on the very end of the replicate, on each replicate. When we get to the analysis, also this treatment won't be part of the factorial analysis. It simply will be dropped out and not included in that because it's not part of the factorial design. But you could have it with if you were going to, maybe it's a reference treatment. And so in your assessment, you wanted to calculate a % of rest or something like that. You certainly can have it with, it could be included in some sort of calculations, but just strictly speaking, it's not part of the factorial design, and therefore it does not get included in the analysis. So that's kind of the comparison treatment here. Again, not very common, at least in the narrow scope that I've been a part of some trainings. No one's really had a great reason. Sometimes people ask about the untreated chat. That I guess would be a little bit about how you strategize on your factorial design. It might be good to include the check as part of the factorial design, perhaps. So in this case, maybe we have our 4 herbicides but we would also like to include a check maybe with each tillage type. So you kind of have a point of reference then with each tillage type to have that check. So we could insert another treatment, and we could make this be, treatment type 5. In this case, this would be the untreated check. Let's, I think I've got a check right here, and this could be our untreated. So by including this in the factor B levels, now you'll have not just one check plot per replicate, but you'll actually have 3, because you'll have a check plot on tillage type 1, a check plot in tillage type 2, and a check plot in tillage type 3. So it might be good to include the check that way. And then again, that is part of the design. So that will be part of the analysis. And so then again, when we get to that report, we can kind of see how the untreated stacks up against the other herbicide products, or maybe vice versa, how the herbicides performed relative to the check within that analysis, because now you have information about untreated on each of those tillage types. So just kind of part of the design. Maybe it might depend on how much space you have in the study, in your trial, if you can add another factor. But just kind of part of how you want to strategize and set up that design in the first place. But it can be advantageous to try to get that check involved. I think what I'll do here, actually, instead of adding a 5th factor B, let's delete that treatment. I'll actually delete that line out. Maybe I'll convert my product 4. Let's make that into the check. So that way we'll still have 4 times 3, 12 treatments involved here, but now one of them is the check. And then we have we only really have 3 herbicide products and the check. And that won't make much of a difference, and we'll have that same size trial map that we were expecting. So that's really about it as far as the main differences in a protocol. So looking at, how do I write a protocol for a multi-factor design? Just make sure to get into the protocol settings before you create the protocol itself. And then here you'll have that treatments editor set up this way, and you're describing factor levels instead of listing out the full set of treatments. As we'll see in just a moment, when you create the trial, then we'll get 3 times 4, we'll get 12 treatments listed out in the list. And then we'll end up actually having 13, because this is the comparison treatment. And that's it really. Everything else now in this protocol will be the same. The header, the protocol description, everything that you typically do in a protocol is going to be the same, regardless of the design. Really just the treatment editor is really the only difference as far as a product. Great question here. What if we have maybe adjuvants that go with these herbicides? I did make this a very plain, boring list here, but just like in a standard study, you can certainly have multiple components for one of these factor levels. So for the example with the adjuvant, let me insert treatment separators. That'll give me a little bit of space to work with, and I can just simply add another component to my factor level B1 here. And then let's choose herbicide, or instead of herbicide, let's change that to our adjuvant. And I'll just grab some adjuvant from the list. So you can certainly do that, just like you've got the, just like you have for any other treatment list that you've done with an RCB or any other design. It's really the same fit here. And so if we want, let me just copy this current treatment line, and I could paste it. Change that treatment number. I would show the paste special, but I'm not certain. I've had some slightly quirky things happen with the treatment list when you're in a factorial, because I think at one time it doesn't totally recognize the different lists. So I'm going to kind of play it safe and just copy and paste this way instead of using the paste special. Sometimes it just gets a little confused. Kind of to very good question here about the treatment number. So let me remove my treatment separators. I think if I just change editors and come back, it should remove all those spaces. Press down the list again. No, it did not. Okay, let's put these treatment lines here. So delete that line, just clean this up a little bit. The other question here is about confusion, where we do have this treatment number 1, but then we have another treatment number 1. And in fact, right now, it looks like we have 3 different treatment number 1s. Yeah, really the key is it's not so much the treatment number, but it's actually the factor level number is really what this is right now. So in a factorial, maybe it would be better to label this or think of it as the level number. This is level 1 for factor A, and this is level 2 for factor A. And we'll actually see that once we get into the trial, we'll actually see both of those pieces of information. So when we're in the trial, we will have a true treatment number 1. There will only be one treatment number 1. And in fact, that'll be the one that has tillage type 1 with H1 and NIS. All 3 of those components will be treatment number 1. And then we'll actually see that the factor level. A1 and B1 is essentially what that will be. And then in the trial, and then in treatment 2, we will have probably tillage type 1 with herbicide. And we'll see the factor A1, B2 this. And so once you get in the trial, then it really has the distinct, unique treatment numbers there. Yeah, here in the protocol, it's great to know. Thanks for kind of pointing that out. That not so much treatment number are these are really level numbers, level underneath the factor heading that we have. So that's good questions there. I can delete these other empty lines, and then we'll get into the trial, and that might help a little bit too. So we've got 3 tillage types. We've got our 4 different herbicides, one of which actually being a check, a zero rate herbicide, if you will. And then we'll also just bring along this comparison treatment. Again, not terribly interesting. You probably won't need it, but kind of just for illustrative purposes, we'll see what happens to it. It's kind of just kind of hangs out, we'll see. So again, really everything else is the same as far as filling out the protocol, planning your assessments, putting in study rules. Everything will be the same really for that as well. And you kind of everything else with the protocol like you typically would. So now once you get ready to create your trial, now we can just go ahead and create the trial just like we would any other protocol. And I'm just going to call this split plot webinar. Since I didn't fill in the trial ID in the header, which you typically would, then it's asking me now because I'm definitely going to need a trial ID. And I create that trial. I'm not going to bother saving this protocol file, even though typically you would definitely would want to do so. But we're just demonstrating here. So now we get our trial map, and let me color by treatment just to start with. So here's our trial map. I've got 4 replicates. So each row here is its own replicate. And this is really going to highlight, since we chose the split plot design, we'll see exactly how things are grouped. So if we were to choose just the factorial design, then these numbers are free to vary however you want in the replicate. So just like you would have in an RCB design, we would have 1 through 13. They could any arrangement at all you would end up with, because it's a factorial design and there are no restrictions on where anything goes within that replicate. So I'm going to color by factor A. You'll see we have a new color by option because we are in a multi-factor design. And so now we can see the kind of grouping here of our factor level. So kind of like we talked about, we had our list of different factors, factor levels. So factor A was our tillage type. And so A1 is tillage type 1, A2 is tillage type 2, and so on. And then the factor B levels were our different herbicide products. And then we kind of have that comparison treatment. Again, he will be treatment number 13, and you'll notice that it just gets tacked on at the end. And he's not really involved in any of this multi-factor design, so it just hangs out on the end of the replicate, basically. But we have the coloring here. So this shows all of the A2. So like we described here, and the reasons for the split plot is that we can't simply put any, mix and match the tillage types throughout the replicate. We're limited in the fact they all have to be together because our equipment is just too wide, or it can only drive through the field a certain way. And so there's no way for it to vary freely throughout the replicate. That would be impossible to achieve. So we need to have them all together here. And that's what we've done because we chose the split plot. So all of the A2s in this replicate are grouped together. And then all of the A1s are grouped together, and all the A3s. Within that, if you look underneath that, we have the different herbicides. So 3, 4, 2, 1, and then the next stat, if you will, 2, 1, 4, 3. Those are allowed to vary all that we want because the split plot, it's only the first factor. Factor A is the only one that has to be grouped together. And then within that, those Bs can be free to be randomized as necessary. If you did have a reason those Bs need to be in a certain order, then that is where that strip block or the crisscross design comes into play. Then kind of like the way we had the A's grouped, you end up with the B's grouped in the other direction. So that's kind of where that would come into play if you had that type of restriction. And then again, now we have the B's in that order. So those can be randomized as is, and you can actually color by that too. So you just want to see how those are more random. They're much less grouped. Those get to be random within that A level. So that's the big thing with the split plot design is this grouping of A's. But you will notice here that within each replicate, the order of the A's varied. So we started with A2 in replicate 1, but now we had A3 be first in the second replicate. And so kind of as we've described with the tillage equipment needing to go all the way down the field, we haven't quite achieved that. Kind of two ways to change that. This auto select for move, this is the drag and drop feature in a trial map where you can change the treatment assignment. You can move plots around to match the shape of your field. We have a new option here where we can drag and drop the main unit, and that is our factor A's. So I have this turned on, and I'm just going to click on plot 101. And now you'll see that actually this whole quartet of plots has been selected. So now I can drag and drop maybe we'll switch these around. So I want my tillage type 1, my A1, to be first, and then A2, and then A3. And then I can repeat that for each of my replicates to manually achieve the randomization I would need where they are all lined up together. So that is the auto-select remove. Now in a multi-factor design here, we can take those main units, and with our split plot, they're all grouped together. Now we can put those into the order that we need them. There is also a setting. So for this specific requirement, we have all of our A1s should be the first set in our replicates, and then the A2, and then the A3. If you go into settings, this will bring you to the layout tab of your protocol settings. So you could also set this even before you created the trial map if you want. You would find it just in the protocol settings as usual. The very last option in this list is to not randomize one unit for the split plot design. You can choose whichever unit, and for us, we want to not randomize A. So then in each replicate, A1 will be first, A2 will be second, and so on. And so then this creates kind of the automatic column, if you will. So now the A1s are all first. So then in each replicate now, we have this nice stacking of our A levels. Like we said, with the tillage, tractor is going to got to go down the field and perpendicular to our replicates, and that's really the only option we have. We can't pick and pop, and so that's kind of the way to achieve that. And again, if we do look at the factor B, we are still having some randomization occur. So again, you're kind of making the best of what you can. If you're limited in some way of randomizing, we still have some possibility of randomization within those factor levels. And when we get to the analysis, because we chose the split plot, ARM is also aware of the fact that we have this particular limited randomization. It's kind of a limited multi-factor randomization, essentially. It's not a full-fledged factorial. There's some limitations, but we can take that into account in the analysis. So that's kind of one of the benefits of ARM is ARM has all that knowledge automatically, and just because you've set the study design to be the split plot, when we run the analysis, it'll make the right choices and it'll analyze it specifically knowing that this is the way we have to randomize the study. So that's the randomization step here. Again, a lot to discuss. Because we chose split plot, if this was just a factorial design, it would have been much quicker because it's much like an RCB in looking at each replicate where you just randomly can assign the list of treatments to wherever they need to go, and we're done. With the split plot, there's a little bit more going on that you need to get set. And again, that comparison treatment, it's just hanging out at the end. You can certainly move them if you need to. So you can move the plot. Maybe if I insert a column right at the beginning, and if I could move this plot, and maybe this treatment's over here, just so they're a little more distributed. However you'd want to set that up. Again, they're not really part of that factorial, and that's just that comparison treatment. But you can move it around if need be. Let me just renumber then what we get. There we go, 201. All right, so we'll just accept that randomization as is and get ourselves into the file now. All right, so there's a special prompt here, and you may or may not see this. ARM is trying to be helpful. It's noticing that we filled in a rate with the herbicide and the rate unit. And then we also had some formulation information in our adjuvant. And so just depending on your setup, maybe it'd be kind of nice to have our one component of our treatment one to have all of that information. In this case, it really wouldn't make any sense. It would not make sense to have a rate related to the tillage type. Certainly not formulation either. So it really would be a no in this case. It would not help. But in some cases, it might be nice to kind of compile everything together into one line. That's really what it's trying to do here. It might be an uncommon thing to pop up, but that's really what it's offering to do. And I'm going to say no, let's keep the treatment list just like we had it. Now it's asking me to save. A bad practice would be to not save it, but here we're just demonstrating, and I'll discard this study anyway afterwards. So I won't save the trial, but you definitely would want to do that. So now we are here in our split plot design, and let me just shrink down the navigation bar. We can kind of show the treatments editor here. So I'm going to hide in this views here. I can hide empty fields. So we can shrink down this editor a little bit and show really what we got. So now we have multiplied out that list. And now we really have kind of a true and proper treatment list, if you will. Like we mentioned now, there really is only one treatment number one, and that it has our tillage type 1, and then it has the information from our factor B, the herbicide number 1. And so that we can actually see and kind of cross-reference here with these two new columns on the treatments editor. So we typically don't have these in an RCB treatments editor, but we do have them here in a multi-factor design. And that is the factor ID and the level number. Again, that kind of corresponds to the settings, as well as when we were in the treatments editor in the protocol, we had the different groupings. So we've got the factor A, that was our tillage type. We can see this is the first tillage type we listed out, A1. And then we had A1 kind of repeated. So that tillage type 1 is with each of our different products. So our B1 level, our B2 level, the B3, and the B4. Again, we named these kind of plain Jane, so it's pretty obvious already that this was 1 and 3, 1 and 2, but more commonly you won't have the number in the treatment name, and so that factor information can help kind of orient you in a sense within the design. And then treatment 5 consists of our A2 and our B1, A2, B2, and so on and so forth. You can see now we have all 12 of our treatments, like we had talked about being multiplied out. We got every combination that we listed out. And then kind of our lonely little comparison treatment at the end, he comes in as treatment number 13. He does not have any link to any factor information at all. He's just floating along there, and that's about it. So that's kind of that's the treatment editor now, fleshed out kind of like you typically would expect. And that's how it looks in the trial, all multiplied out. And again, just like we saw in the protocol, really everything else is about the same. There's really nothing different in the site description. I can pin this down. Really nothing different in the assessment data. You can fill in your data just the same as any other study. We have your plot numbers and all of the data columns. Really isn't much different in the multi-factor design as far as data entry goes or anything like that. You really have the same features, same everything now. You just have a little bit more information on the trial map. And again, that treatment editor has 2 new columns. That's about it for the real differences. So the last phase I kind of want to show would be the analysis. And so we'll need to have some data for that. Instead of me just hand typing a bunch of junk, I'm going to close this trial. Again, I'm not going to save it. And I'm just going to open up a tutorial file instead. So here, this is your typical study list, the list of files you have been working on. At the bottom, there's a checkbox for tutorial. And this is kind of a list of example studies that get included with all ARM installations. So you can open this up, mess around with these files. They're saved just on your local computer, and they can be messed around with and broken all you want. If you want to just have something to play around with and investigate, you can certainly do so. I'm going to look for, the split plot. We try to name these to point out to what feature they're trying to demonstrate. And so in this case, it's a split plot design. We have one about fungicide, a few that are herbicide products, insecticide. So if you're looking for inspiration or examples, this tutorial can be a nice way just to look and poke around and see some examples. So I'm going to take the split plot. I think I got two of them. I'm looking here. I've got a protocol, so that makes sense that that's named the same, but it is multiple. But I do have two that are marked as trials. So at the far right, it'll tell you your study file path. This is how I can figure out why I have two trials that are the same, and it looks like I've just copied one. So that's not the best practice ever, but in the tutorial list, it matters much less because it's not like official trial IDs or anything, but it will warn me it's got the same identifier as this file that we made a copy of. So yeah, I'm not worried about unique IDs. That particular message about the GUID, the GUID, that, or if you were uploading to a database, then it does definitely matter. But of course, it doesn't matter in this case because we're just in the example files. So real quickly here, just to orient ourselves in the design, we can check to look. And this is a split plot, slightly different. We are dealing with herbicide products, but instead of working with tillage as the other factor, this is the rate of treatment. So if we look at the treatments editor real briefly, we have three different herbicide products: Accord, Brominal Plus, and Canon. And then we have three different rates, a 1, 1.5, and 2, or maybe low, medium, high, however you want to describe those. That is what we have. And then we also have a comparison treatment at the bottom here, treatment number 10. So he won't be included. So we've got 3 levels of A, 3 levels of B, and then an untreated check. Again, doesn't really belong in a sense in the multi-factor. So the key here, let me clear out my existing set. The trick here in a multi-factor, whether it's split plot or the factorial design, all 3 of those options there, all of them can use a slightly different report. So typically the AOV means table is what you would use in an RCB design. But right underneath that is the factorial AOV table. And that is the report you want to use in a multi-factor design. Very similar options to the AOV report. And in fact, you'll see the structure of the report is quite similar to the AOV. So it shouldn't be too different. I'm going to just press next and we'll preview this report on the screen and kind of highlight the differences and what we're getting here with this analysis that you don't in just the standard RCB design. All right, so let me zoom in a little bit. The typical construct where we have the header description of the assessment with each assessment data column being printed. And then we have treatment information. Here's the first difference. We start out with replicate means. So we just get to see the replicate means. There's no other statistics there. It's really just for your information, maybe see how consistent those replicates were if you had differences in replicates. But moving down, we get to something a little more interesting. We have a table of A means. So this would be your factor A level. In this case, our herbicide product. So in this case, regardless of the rate, how did Accord do versus our Brominal Plus versus Tannin? So what we get is a grand mean of sorts for that A1 across your different B levels. So really this would be the grand means from treatment number 1, treatment number 4, treatment number 7. You know, just think of that treatment list, anything that had a Accord in it, regardless of the rate. We get a grand mean of each of those products, and then we also get statistics. So we're going to run an ANOVA analysis, and we have our mean separation as well. So this is kind of a cross section. Regardless of what rate that was applied, how did these products stack up against each other? Then we get the table of B means. So this is kind of the other cross section of data. So now we don't care what product it was, just how did the different rates perform? And so it looks like as the rate went up, more product that we applied, the better things did, or at least the higher value. What type of assessment is this? This is a control. So yeah, the better it did. So again, you get a different cross section. We get the ANOVA analysis on that with the mean separations. And then we get the whole combination of all of the levels. So this would be really treatments 1 through 9 in this case. The treatment means there and the mean separation with the statistics. One more thing then here, if we move down to the AOV table, this lists out all of the levels that we were able to split out the variation. And so here we can see that this is a complete split plot AOV table. So again, the analysis is fully aware that we are in a split plot. We were limited in how things were randomized in the study. And so the variation split out has taken that into account. We've got the different levels. So the level A, the error associated with that level, and then B and the error B. So again, that's your herbicide product, and then the rate. And then you also have an interaction term. So this AB would be the interaction between those two. So that can be a important value to make note of, is the p-value associated with that. So that would tell you, was there an interaction between those two? It depends which product you were using and what rate that was applied at. It might depend, then the result might depend on which one. It wasn't all just the higher rate you did was the better, but actually there was an interaction between both of them. So that can be important note thing that you would get here that of course we wouldn't see in the AOV analysis. There's no interaction. I mean, there's no split out of those levels of your factorial design. And so we're getting a complete split plot for each column. So column 1, 2, 3, how many columns I have? Looks like we have 6. And so that's really the report. Again, it's quite similar to the AOV in structure, but you're getting more information and you're splitting out your variation. We know a little bit more, and we can split things out a little bit more, and we can investigate any interaction between the levels that you might have. And so, going back to our original example with the product and the tillage type, that interaction term, that might be an important part of what you're trying to learn is there an interaction between the tillage type and which product we're using? that might be an important thing that you want to find out. And so that would be a reason for running the multi-factor design in the first place. One more really quick tip, and we've got just a couple minutes here, so kind of want to open the floor for questions. That's really all I had, but one real brief note would be you still can run an Aov means table. So we do have the factorial design in the study, but you can take a look at the Aov means table as well. I'm just going to preview it here instead of moving to the next screen. But you can run the Aov report, and essentially that will basically deprecate this study down to an RCB just within the analysis. So you can see your standard analysis for the study. Again, it's just listing out the treatments. There is no special sections for the different factor levels. You just have the full list of each one. And you'll notice, I'll zoom in a little bit more in case you can't see, treatment 10, we do list it on the report, but there's no comparison letter. And that's a sign that it was not included in the analysis. So that comparison treatment, it's just there hanging out for comparison's sake, but it is not included in the analysis because this is a multi-factor design. If you did need this included, like you truly want to treat this study like a standard RCB design for your analysis, what you can do then, if I close the report, you can go into your settings and you can deprecate a design. I say deprecate, I mean basically go to the design here. We have a split plot, but in the sense every split plot could be considered an RCB because you would have 12 treatments, or I guess in this case, the 10 treatments really. Now when you change that, if I go to the Aov report, for some reason I have an action code here that's excluding the check, but in column 2, you can see the untreated check is being included here in the comparison. It's being included in the analysis. Column 1, it's not, because I actually have an action code EC, which specifically tells the ARM to exclude the check treatment. So, but you can see in these other columns that they get included because it's now been considered just an RCB design. All right, so that's it. That's really the three big points I wanted to show, the kind of the different phases for a multi-factor design. Thanks everyone for joining. I can hang on the line here for a couple more minutes if you have questions, but to be respectful of everyone's time, definitely let people go. As I mentioned, if you're not quite certain, maybe you have a study you've already been creating that you think maybe could be a multi-factor design, feel free to shoot me an email and we can kind of take a look, see, yeah, this might work, and we can kind of step through how you can transition it. It's just a couple of steps to do that, and you get a little bit more in the analysis, on a case by case basis. Outside of that, we appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today, and you should see an email a little later today with the recording. So, thanks everyone for joining, and I'll hang on the line here if you're typing up a question. But thanks everyone.